In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. We praise Allah. We seek His forgiveness. We seek His guidance. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none to lead astray. Whomever He allows to go astray, there is none that can guide but He. And I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah alone without any partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Allah sent him with the clear proof and the religion of truth to be triumphant over all other religions, whether the disbelievers like it or not. May the peace and blessings and mercy of Allah be upon our Prophet Muhammad, upon his family and companions, and whomever follows them in righteousness until the final day. Welcome. We will embark upon explaining the treatise called The Three Fundamental Principles and Its Evidences by the Shaykh and Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala. This is an intermediate explanation of the three principles and its evidences. In Arabic, it's called Al-Usul al-Thalatha wa Adillatuha. And of course, like I mentioned, it's by the Shaykh and Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah. When we embark upon this explanation, I will make sure that it's not too elementary and basic, and it's not too complicated and complex for you. I will try to make it intermediate, and we'll try to decipher the meanings and the evidences from the text of the treatise itself. We will decipher its contents, discover and infer its meanings, inshallah ta'ala, together. Before we start, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make us from those people that tread the path of knowledge, to tread the path of the people of knowledge, and to make us from the ones that act upon the knowledge that we learn. He is all-seeing, all-answering, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before we start on embarking upon the explanation of this great treatise, I feel that we should give three basic introductions. The first introduction, I would like to give a brief introduction about the author of this treatise. The author is Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Most of you guys know him. His full name is Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Sulaiman ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Rashid ibn Buraid ibn Muhammad ibn Buraid ibn Mushrif al-Tamimi. His father was a very knowledgeable person at the time. He was very humble, pious, and virtuous. And he actually took over the judiciary, judging between the affairs of the people, in a town called Huraymila in the Najd area. His grandfather Sulaiman was an ocean of knowledge. He was one of the most knowledgeable people in Najd at the time. He was responsible for issuing religious edicts, or fatwa, as they're known in Arabic. And he was responsible for giving the people fatwa at that time. Many scholars studied under him. The Shaykh himself was born in 1115 Hijri, which is equivalent to 1703 in the Gregorian calendar. And from a young age, people noticed that he had an amazing love for knowledge, for ilm. From a very, very young age, his father, when he became 12 years old, his father put him forward to lead the people in salah, to lead the people in congregational prayer, which meant that he had the most knowledge of Quran for the people of his age, and he memorized the Quran at a very, very young age. His father and people, his contemporaries when he was young, were astonished at how fast and how quick he could actually memorize stuff. Even if he just read something once, he would save it to memory. So it was really, really amazing. His father would declare later on in his life that I would take religious rulings and verdicts from my son before he reached the age of puberty. And that is a great, great grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this can happen to a shaykh and a scholar from a very, very young age. If we talk about the time when the shaykh was born in the Arabian Peninsula, at that time the Arabian Peninsula was teeming with shirk. Shirk, of course, is associating partners with Allah in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the manifestations of shirk, from attaching oneself to other than Allah, innovations in religion. So the Shaykh, he strove to raise the banner of Tawheed, the banner of La ilaha illallah. He came to bring this banner about Islamic monotheism and the oneness of Allah. He came to rectify the people's Aqeedah, and which is the tenet of belief. And he really tried to do this all his life. He came also to annihilate shirk, which is associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. And he did this. He annihilated shirk all his life by his actions, by his statements, by his jihad in Allah's cause. Until the day he died, he was staying upon this track and this course of calling to Tawheed and abolishing shirk in the Arabian Peninsula. He died in the year 1206 Hijri, which is equivalent to 1794 in the Gregorian calendar, at the age of 91 years old. After his death, he was succeeded by his sons and students who also carried the banner of Tawheed and sound Aqeedah after him. The Shaykh left many books in Aqeedah, amongst other books. Many books. We can't mention them all, but I will mention the most famous ones. You've probably heard of Kitab al-Tawheed, which is the book of Tawheed, the book of monotheism, which is 66 chapters on Tawheed of worship. It has numerous explanations and commentaries. It's very famous. Another book is called Kashf al-Shubuhat, which is exposing the doubts. It's a book that exposes those who seek other than Allah, grave worshippers, etc. There's another book called Al-Qawa'id al-Arba', which is the four fundamentals, a very gentle and sweet treatise explaining the four fundamentals of the Tawheed of worship. He also has a book called The Three Principles. It's treatise that we're actually going to explain now, inshallah ta'ala, the book we're doing now. There's also a book called Mufid al-Mustafid fi Tarik al-Tawheed, which I translated into benefiting the one who seeks benefit from the one who abandons Tawheed. Certain issues in which the Shaykh clarifies the difference between the people of Islam, the Ahlul Islam as they're known in Arabic, and the people of the days of ignorance, or Ahl al-Jahiliyyah, and shows the difference between the two. There's also the Nullifiers of Islam, which is a book that shows the 10 nullifiers that throw you out of the fold of Islam. If we seek refuge in Allah, we fall into those. Walayadu billah, inshallah, we never fall into these nullifiers. The second introduction, let's talk about the treatise that we have at hand. Like I said, the treatise is called Al-Usul al-Thalatha, or Thalathat al-Usul in Arabic, the three fundamental principles. Very elementary, basic book. The Shaykh himself and his students after him would pay particular attention to this book, teaching it to the general masses of the Muslims. They would teach it to the different congregations of the masjids. They would go out, the scholars would take this treatise and they would go out to the villages and towns and they would call the people to this book and they would explain this book to the general masses there. Despite the book being basic and easy, it has the three most important essential foundations and principles of our religion that any Muslim needs to know. Who is your Lord, what is your religion, and who is your prophet. The three main basic principles that every Muslim needs to know. Modern day ulama and scholars of the modern day, they pay particular attention to this book in different ways. The first way they pay particular attention to this book is by writing explanations and commentaries of this book. Many explanations and commentaries have been written about Usul al-Thalatha. I can't mention them all, but I will mention amongst the most famous are Hashiyat Thalathat al-Usul Ibn al-Qasim al-Najdi. This is very famous. There's Sharh al-Usul al-Thalatha by Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, may Allah mercy be upon him. Husul al-Ma'mul, Sharh Thalathat al-Usul, and this is by Shaykh Abdullah Fawzan, may Allah preserve all of our mashayikh, insha'Allah. They would also pay particular attention to teaching this book to the people of the people of knowledge. Would pay particular attention to teaching this book to the children. And especially memorizing. The young children, these mutoon, they're called mutoon. These kinds of treatises and books are called mutoon. And they would pay particular attention for children, wanting their children to memorize these books at a young age. And from the most notable scholars that would pay attention to this was Shaykh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, rahimahullah ta'ala. He'd pay particular attention to having his young students memorize this book. Paying particular attention to teaching it to the general masses, like we spoke about before, and putting this treatise into lines of poetry or sonnets, which makes it more, you can read it more easily if it's in the form of a sonnet or a poem. So many mashayikh have done this on the modern day mashayikh. Moving on to our third introduction, the topic of these treatises and its main points. Okay, so basically the treatise consists of 4 main points. The first one is the introduction, where the author mentions 4 issues: knowledge, action, propagating, and patience. Then the second main point or introduction, the author mentions 3 issues in the rules of establishment of the tawheed of worship, the tawheed of ibadah, Islamic monotheism, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our glorious religion. The third main topic, he mentions the issue of the true meaning of al-Hanafiyyah, which was the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the deciphered religion of Islam from Hanafiyyah, the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which is to worship Allah alone and not associate any partners in their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the true meaning of Hanafiyyah. And the fourth main point of this treatise is to actually explain what are these 3 principles, and they are to know your Lord, to know your Prophet, and to know the religion of Islam. He mentions each of these foundations, these principles, and they're in detail with their evidences. Okay, inshallah, we will start the explanation of the treatise. The treatise starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'lam rahimakallahu أنه يجب علينا تعلم 4 مسائل. This is how the Shaykh starts his treatise. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. No, may Allah have mercy upon you. It is obligatory upon us to learn 4 issues. So, we notice that the Shaykh starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. He started with treatise with what's called the Basmalah, which is saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And this is the known custom of the people of knowledge, that they start their pieces of knowledge and their treatises and their books with the Basmalah. This is derived from, and they take as an example, the chapters of the glorious Quran, which all start with this Basmalah except for Surah At-Tawbah. All the chapters in the Quran start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Also, another foundation where they take this Basmalah from is from the correspondence of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he used to communicate with the different leaders and the different rulers of the time. When he used to correspond with them and send his correspondence to them, he would start his correspondence with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, like the correspondence he sent to Heraclius, the Byzantine Empire of the time. And yes, there is actually a hadith in regards to this. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, any important matter that doesn't start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is defective. This hadith, despite the meaning being correct, it's weak in narration. The second issue, after he says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, he says, I'lam rahimakallahu. Look what he says, guys. I'lam rahimakallah. Look, he said, I'lam rahimakallah. Know, O Allah, have mercy upon you. This is a gentleness and a very, very sweet characteristic from the author. He starts by making a dua for you, the reader. He says, I'lam rahimakallah. Know, Allah have mercy upon you. So he's making dua. He started his treatise by making a supplication for you. So, and this is incumbent upon the people of knowledge, the students of knowledge especially, that when they want to get their message across, how nice it would be to start with something gentle, like a dua. Because if you make a dua, a supplication for someone, it's going to make the person you're addressing accept it more. You're starting off with a very, very gentle and kind way, making dua for the person you're addressing, that Allah have mercy upon them. You know, this is really, really very, very good. And the people that you're addressing will actually accept the information that you want to give them if you started with this dua, making dua for them. Then the author says, so he says, I'lam rahimakallah, know, Allah have mercy upon you, أنه يجب علينا تعلم 4 مسائل. It is obligatory upon us to learn 4 issues. This is how the author mentions things in this treatise. He limits his things, like I will speak about 3 issues. I will speak about 4 issues. He limits the things he wants to speak about in this fashion, making it easier for the learner, making it easier for the one who seeks knowledge. If I limit my things, I'm going to speak about 3 topics. I'm going to speak about 4. I'm going to speak about 5 main topics. This is the way of this Shaykh of making things easier for the person who wants to learn these things. Also, he mentions the ruling regarding these 4 things, because he says, أَنَّهُ يَجِبُ عَلَيْنَا. Yajibu means it's obligatory. So, it's obligatory for us, it's wajib or obligatory for us to learn these 4 issues and questions that he's talking about. The religion cannot be completed except by them. Knowledge cannot be attained except by achieving them. Then after that, the Shaykh mentions what they are. So he says, Al-Ula العلم وهو معرفة الله ومعرفة نبيه ومعرفة دين الإسلام بالأدلة. The first is knowledge, and that is having knowledge of Allah, having knowledge of His Prophet, and knowing the religion of Islam with evidences. This is the first issue that is obligatory upon human beings in this world to learn. And we will discuss them in 5 different points, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, the definition of ilm, or knowledge. Knowledge is knowing the truth and guidance with evidence. And if the word ilm, or knowledge, is said by itself, is mentioned on its own, we always take it to mean religious knowledge, Islamic knowledge, Shari'i knowledge. Not any other knowledge that we have in this world, which we have many different types of knowledge. But when we say ilm, we mean Islamic knowledge. So this is the first thing that is pertinent and obligatory upon a person to learn, the rulings of his religion. It is incumbent that a Muslim learn and gain knowledge so he may worship Allah Azza wa Jalla upon basira, which is insight. He needs to, it's mandatory that a person learn. They need to learn their Islam. They need to learn their worship. Their tawheed, or their making Allah one, will not be complete except how they learn when they pray how to fast, and how to learn how to pray, learn how to fast. This, you cannot, how can you achieve the oneness of Allah without learning this? Okay, the ulama mention, this is the second thing I want to speak about in this point. The ulama mentioned that the first obligation upon a human being who is able to perform acts of worship is the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, the true Islamic monotheism and the oneness of Allah. You need to learn the true meaning and have conviction of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. You have to learn this. And this is the meaning of Aqeedah. This is creed or belief. Majority of the ulama are of the option that blind following or taqleed is not permissible when it comes to Aqeedah. Aqeedah means that you have to have the conviction in your heart and the belief in your heart of La ilaha illallah. You can't say, I believe in Tawheed as so-and-so believes in Tawheed. No, that's not going to work. You have to believe in Tawheed as a self-conviction from your heart. That's how you believe in Tawheed. And when I talk about this Aqeedah, I'm talking about the Aqeedah that a person's Islam cannot be established except by it, which is Tawheed. La ilaha illallah. Okay? Now, the knowledge that a person learns is of 2 types. Okay? Stay with me here. The first is Aqeedah. The person must achieve the belief in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A way of attaining that belief in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to learn what is contrary to Tawheed, which is shirk, associating partners with Allah. Why should we learn what is contrary and opposite to Tawheed? We learn about shirk so that a person doesn't fall into it. That's why you know your enemy. Our enemy is shirk, and we know it, and we don't want to fall into it. That's why we study that. The second thing is acts of worship that are obligatory as well. We said Aqeedah is obligatory, Tawheed is obligatory upon you to learn. Also acts of worship such as Salah, which is prayer, Tahara, purification, Siyam, fasting, Hajj, pilgrimage, and Zakah. These are obligations on a person. It is obligatory to learn them. It is not permissible in our deen to be ignorant of these things. Knowledge is of 2 types. Okay. Now, learning knowledge is of 2 types, the ruling of which learning the knowledge is. Let me explain this a little bit better. The type of knowledge that we learn, one can be called fard ala al-kifaya, okay? Which means that if some people learn it, fardun ala al-kifaya, which means that if some people learn this type of knowledge, then the burden of this learning is lifted from the other people. Okay? So if some people learn this knowledge in a society, some people have gone about it, then the burden of learning this particular knowledge is lifted upon the other members of that society. I translated this as obligation of sufficiency. That if some people learn this knowledge and have knowledge of this, then the burden of learning this is lifted upon the other people in that society. They don't need to learn it. Some examples of this type of knowledge of fard ala al-kifaya are sciences that are means to achieving something, like the science of inheritance, which is how much does a mother get in inheritance, how much does a son get, the son, the daughter, this and that. Arabic language, the science of hadith, the chains of narrations, the level of authenticity of a hadith, the science of the foundation of jurisprudence. Certain chapters of jurisprudence that not every member of the society needs, like chapters on commercial transactions, chapters on matrimony, divorce, etc. These kind of things, judiciary things. The second type of knowledge, like we mentioned before, is called the knowledge, which learning of it is called fard ayn, which is a mandatory obligation. This is a mandatory obligation upon every Muslim to learn this type of knowledge. We mentioned before, Aqeedah, like Tawheed, and the 5 pillars of Islam, purification and other things, rulings of the deen that are important and obligation to learn, and you will not be excused if you do not learn these things. Okay? The author mentions that knowledge encompasses 3 things. To know Allah, that you may know Allah Azza wa Jal. You have to know Allah Azza wa Jal in the oneness of His divinity and worship, Tawheed al-Ubudiyyah. You have to know Allah Azza wa Jal in the oneness of His lordship, which is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. To know that Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator, the sustainer, the giver of life, the taker of life. You need to know these things about your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. To also know Allah in the Tawheed of His names and attributes, that He has the most beautiful names of attributes subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second knowledge encompasses the second point, which is to know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is an intermediary between us and Allah. How else would we have the message of Islam and the truth of our religion if it weren't for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam being an intermediary between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the third is to know the religion of Islam with its evidences. So we spoke about al-ula, al-ilmu, wa huwa ma'rifatullahi wa ma'rifatu nabiyhi wa ma'rifatu din al-islami bil-adillah. Now he moves on to the second thing, al-thaniya, al-amalu bih. The second, to act upon the knowledge. Yes, this is the second matter that all Muslims, male and female, need to learn, that they act upon the knowledge that they gain. So when you learn, you comprehend, you differentiate truth from falsehood, that's not sufficient. You need to act upon that knowledge that you learn. Actions, good deeds, are the fruits of your knowledge. Okay? Knowledge that a human has without actions, useless. Useless knowledge. Okay? It's very, very important that you act upon the knowledge. Leaving off actions while having knowledge, is a very, very big calamity. Because the one who knows is not like the ignorant one. This person knows the evidence. He knows the religion of Islam, yet he decides not to act. This is a very, very big calamity. The person who has knowledge, the truth has been established against him. The evidences and the truth has been established against him. He doesn't have an excuse. You know, but you don't act. Subhanallah. Okay? If a person learns knowledge and knows the truth and distinguishes it from falsehood, yet doesn't act upon that knowledge, that person fits in either of these 2 categories. The first category is that he learns the knowledge only so that people may praise him or for showing off. Waliyadu billah. I'm going to gain my knowledge and have all this knowledge just to show the people, look, I'm knowledgeable. I have more knowledge than you. I'm boasting my knowledge. Who did you learn the knowledge for in the first place? Didn't you learn it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this goes, there's a hadith that we can mention here, which was narrated by Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, another will be a man who has studied religious knowledge and has taught it, and who used to recite the Quran. He will be brought, and Allah will make known to him His favors, and he will recognize them. The Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, and what did you do about them? he will say, I studied religious knowledge and I taught it and I recited the Quran for your sake. He subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, you have lied. You did but study religious knowledge that it might be said of you, he is learned. And you recited the Quran that it might be said of you, he is a reciter. And so it was said. Then he will be ordered to be dragged along his face until he is cast into the hellfire. The second category of a person who has knowledge but doesn't act upon that knowledge is not a person who shows off, but rather a person who's lazy. We seek refuge in Allah from this as well. This is a calamity as well. It's laziness, objection, because you can't be compared to the ignorant one. You know, yet you don't act. My last advice before I end this lesson, inshallah, O student of knowledge, don't be a vessel that carries ilm with it without actually benefiting from it. If you want blessing in your ilm, then act upon the ilm that you learn. Different ahkam that you learn in regards to salah, in regards to your worship, implement them in your daily life. Different sunnahs that you've learned, implement them. Okay? Whether it be an obligatory act, whether it be a sunnah, implement it in your daily life. Allah will make you successful, insha'Allah. There's a hadith which also has been weakened by the people of knowledge. Regardless, it can be mentioned here, insha'Allah. The meaning is correct. Whomsoever acts upon what he has gained knowledge of, Allah will make that person inherit knowledge he did not know of. So let's try to act upon our knowledge until we meet in the next lesson, insha'Allah. I bid you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.